For this review, I thought I'd try something a little different. Instead of examining a retelling of Alice's adventures in Wonderland or Through the Looking Glass, I have chosen a 1985 film entitled Dreamchild, starring Ian Holmes as Lewis Carroll and Coral Brown and Amelia Shankly as Alice. The film tells the story of a now 80-year-old Alice who travels from England to America to receive an honorary degree from Columbia University as part of a celebration marking 100 years since Lewis Carroll's birth. The premise is based on real events, as Liddell did indeed make this trip to attend the celebration in 1932 in the midst of an economic depression.
I think now my adventures overseas will be almost as interesting as my adventures underground were.
The main plot is merged with flashbacks, dreams and hallucinations as Alice comes to terms with her memories of Carroll, whilst also struggling with her deteriorating health. She is accompanied by her maid Lucy, who we find out was an orphan took in by Alice, or should I say Mrs. Hargreaves, as this is how Alice prefers to be addressed. An immediate indicator that she is no longer the fun-loving child depicted in the book. Instead, she is a no-nonsense killjoy, casually racist,
unless the Red Indians try to come aboard in their canoe.
a possible homophobe,
Are you by any chance one of those, what are they called?
Ma'am?
Homosexuals.
and an immense snob.
I refer to the common man, vast boards, the great unwashed.
Lucy is extremely shy, with a nervous disposition. However, she is still very curious and longing for a thrill, thus creating an opportunity for both characters to go on an inner as well as outer journey. The film begins in a mysterious manner, washing us up on a dark, grim-looking shore to the sound of melancholic music. Shadowy figures perch on jagged rocks, and sobbing can be heard as we approach the scene, which comes to a jump start as the griffin reveals his colourful wings, a stark contrast to the bleak setting. Accompanying the griffin is the mock turtle, two of several puppets created by Jim Henson's Creature Workshop, all made to closely resemble to Neil's illustrations, drawing out the darker aspects of each character. We see old Alice transform into young Alice, with dialogue closely resembling that from the book.
How many hours a day did you do lessons?
10 hours the first, 9 the next, then 8.
What a curious plan.
That's the reason they're countless and stupid.
The waves combine with those beneath the ship on which Alice is aboard on her way to America, switching the vibe from Jim Henson's Labyrinth to James Cameron's Titanic. Two fantastic films, but for completely different reasons. But somehow, it gels together really nicely. Over in New York, the press have heard about the arrival of the real-life Alice in Wonderland.
Any old dame who fell down a rabbit hole and sat down to tea with the Mad Hatter is going to cheer me up.
And every reporter wants a piece of the action, including ex-journalist Jack Doland. He is a typical Jack the Lad type character, which I assume is why they gave him that name. Cheeky but charming, he helps Alice and Lucy deal with the press, becoming Alice's agent and Lucy's love interest. During a series of flashbacks, we are shown Reverend Charles Ludwig Dodgson, aka Lewis Carroll, interacting and even snooping on the three little girls, always with a wistful look in his eye. Perhaps he is longing for the little girl that once was, as Alice is starting to grow up and lose her sense of childish wonder in pursuit of more adult affairs. The first flashback begins on the ship, as Alice sits alone in her room, staring in the mirror, reciting a passage from the book describing Alice's journey down the rabbit hole. It leads us to Oxford University, where we see the three little girls playing croquet, followed by a very telling scene in which the girls speak with their mother. And though the conversation is short, we find out a lot of information. Mrs. Liddell is becoming increasingly concerned with Dodgson's interest in Alice. Hardly surprising when you consider he has stood outside listening in.
But why on earth should he say that to you?
Because he loves me, of course.
the famous beggar girl photograph is also referenced. Something that still causes controversy to this very day regarding the appropriateness of the image.
He says I'm a wistful little beggar girl.
Later, we see another real-life photograph of Alice brought to life. Dodgson is clearly infatuated with Alice, staring at her for uncomfortable periods of time and expressing overly sentimental compliments and endearments. Alice seems to mostly enjoy these affections, so much so that she has learned how to emotionally manipulate Dodgson. However, at times she is clearly deeply uncomfortable, caused through both her maturing mind and body, as well as her mother's suspicions of Dodgson's intent. At one point, Dodgson even hints at the idea of marrying Alice.
Have you thought about whom you might like to...
Mr. Dodgson.
marry?
Many theorise this is something that actually occurred, stating it as the reason for the sudden end of contact between Dodgson and the Little family, and it is strange that his diary entries have been purposefully removed from around the time the contact ceased. During the Victorian era, the legal age of consent was just 12 years old, and it wasn't uncommon for a man to marry a child. However, Mrs. Little viewed herself to be of a higher class than Dodgson, so regardless of age, she would never have approved him as a suitor for Alice. Whether you believe this theory or not, it certainly holds some ground, and using it as a subtext in the movie set the foundation for an unsettling feel throughout. Every moment in the movie had something to say. Lines were loaded with layers of meaning, and every facial expression and movement conveyed underlying and repressed feelings. The attention to detail is also excellent, with references to the book, both obvious and subtle, liberally scattered throughout. One integral flashback depicts the boat ride down the river, said to be the birthplace of Alice's adventures, in which we see Dodgson coming up with the tale. The flashback is intertwined with one of the scariest moments in the film. Alice, in a state of half sleep, half hallucination, stumbles upon a truly terrifying Mad Hatter's tea party, containing many of the original lines, but with a hyper-aggressive and ultra-creepy edge.
You stupid half-wit, ugly old hag. You should be dead, dead, dead.
The caterpillar scene had a similar vibe, as the words of old Father William are replaced with old Mrs. Hargreaves.
You are old, Mrs. Hargreaves.
And we dive deeper into Alice's psyche.
My mother tore up all his letters to me.
Two major Wonderland characters, the White Rabbit and the Queen of Hearts, do not make an appearance, at least not in their traditional form. However, it may have been the writer's intention to implicate Carol as the White Rabbit, the Queen of Hearts, maybe Alice's mother, or perhaps even Alice herself, as indicated through lines such as
You were late, Mr. Dolan.
and
Off with the other boot.
Lucy is referred to as
A little girl.
and the way Jack behaves around her would be deemed inappropriate by today's standards, with his touchy-feely and persistent nature.
What do you want?
You.
This is viewed with an awareness that things were different back then, just like they were different back in Carol's day, though it is easier to relate to Jack than to Carol. Therefore, the Lucy and Jack narrative acts as a stepping stone to the main issue of Alice and Carol. Despite its darkness, the movie maintains a great sense of humour, often through the dated attitudes and prejudices of people of the past, but also through Coral Brown's perfect delivery and comic timing. Amelia Shankly also did a fantastic job as young Alice, powerfully delivering the subtext through her eyes and facial expressions. Unfortunately, I wasn't so keen on Ian Holmes' portrayal of Carol, though this is mostly down to directorial choices rather than Holmes' ability. To me, Lewis Carroll is somewhat of an idol, so I very much dislike seeing his character reduced to that of a repressed paedophile. Overall, however, the movie was great and definitely worth a watch. It is a unique addition to the many interpretations of Alice's adventures, which is often overlooked, and I have decided to award Dreamchild a worthy 7.5 cheeky Cheshire Cat grins. Let me know what you think, and if you would like to support my channel, why not buy me a cup of tea by using the link. Stay curious, fellow Wonderlanders. Until next time.
When the butterflies kiss the tulips.